All right, well, thank you guys all for coming. This is something that I've worked on for a long time, and first time that I'm really publicly talking about it. We're not going to get really technical on some of this stuff, on a lot of this stuff. I mean, you could analyze TCP dumps and packets and binaries forever. I mean, we could spend hours and hours and days going over the behaviors and the mindsets and all the different issues that happen with botnets. So we're just going to talk about the particular projects that we've experienced and have a lot of time with working with, and we're going to show some examples of some botnets and how they can be dealt with and what's worked and what doesn't work. And just like we all know, if you put something out on the internet, eventually it'll happen. So please excuse the long title, and I figured the long cat would fit with the long title, so that's what that's all about. So I'm the rodent. I'm from Las Vegas, and that's my logo. I chew on cables and do stuff like that. But I host irc.2600.net and public shell servers, and I help out wherever I can. So and then here's the beef.
Yeah, I help Mr. Rodent here with 2600.net. I run one of the nodes there. I'm also a big OpenVMS fan. How many people run OpenVMS or even heard of it? Wow, okay. I run the Death Row cluster, which allows, all three, even more than I thought. That allows people to get accounts and whatnot on. It's completely free. I'm also big into VoIP. Written a couple of books for a company called Singress, who's been awesome. And I write code and actually still play with X25 networks. I'd be interested to see if you have any X25 network stories, being here in Germany and whatnot. I'd like to hear them. But anyways, that's me.
We have an affinity for antiquated network technology and
evidently.
Equipment and good. Okay, so we all know what a botnet is. We all know what a DDoS is, so we don't need to get too specific in that. But how does botnets and DDoS relate to online communities? And basically it boils down to this has just been my experience in the many years is you put something online, eventually you're going to come across it. You'll get all of it, whether it's flooders, phishers, trolls, DDoS, you will eventually get it. I mean, there's no ifs, ands, or buts about it. And if you haven't, you've been really lucky. Or you haven't noticed it because you don't have the right tools in place to see it. So, and that's what a lot of it is, just being able to observe what's going on in your network, what's happening out in the world. So, so what can you do? Pretty much boils down to like three things. You can defend yourself, just hunker down in the bunker and just roll with it and try to keep your services up. You can report it and take the information or the intel to the appropriate people or to researchers and stuff like that. And then, you can be Bob the hacker and be proactive and actually do something about it. So I personally feel that no matter what, every little bit helps. I feel that botnets and, let's just say botnets are the worst thing on the internet. I mean, it's the only thing that no matter what, it's always just going to do something bad, and it's the only thing that really hurts it pretty often. So I do want to ask, and I've been pondering this for a long time, and for many years now, actually. Could anyone, tell me one good thing that botnets do for technology or the networks, or one? Okay, but that's still, you're still borrowing services, bandwidth, electricity, CPU time. So is that good? I mean,
have you seen any botnets where they're strictly loading SETI clients, or?
I would say that SETI at home and protein folding at home are botnets.
Okay, now I'm thinking of but in that case, people willingly are becoming a part of that network, right?
That's composed of unwilling.
Okay. then unwilling.
Well, generally,
unwilling participants of a botnet.
So I mean, our definition of it, I have yet to find anything beneficial, except from like my perspective of being able to research it and learn more about it. I love learning and experiencing new technologies and new viewpoints. So that's why I ask. I love to talk with people, even if you are doing this. I really don't care. If you're black hat, white hat, gray hat, I don't care. It's none of my business.
And we've actually talked about that. As you kind of pointed out, the SETI idea of like, wouldn't it be neat if some of these guys were doing that, like, SETI and stuff like that, they were infecting machines, and at least, that would be like at least something kind of useful.
At least it'd be an attempt of trying to do something good. And believe, I run SETI. I'm in the top 2%. I know. Like, I wish I had the poor ethics or morals to just do that. But I mean, obviously my account would get fried. But
just install SETI on Storm.
Install SETI on Storm. There you go. Okay, so no one can tell me anything beneficial from botnets, yeah?
Botnets forcing people to update their clients, otherwise they
He said,
Oh, it's the Robin Hood effect.
he said it
It's
forces people to update their clients. So
botnets could be created.
in theory, I agree with that, but a lot of times I've seen, well, Bob the hacker has seen where botnets, they are just because they're unupdated machines and they'll never be updated. So it never forces them to do it because either they don't know that they're a zombie or that they're infected, or they don't know how to do it, or they're not running legit operating systems, so they can't get the updates. So
Many people started upgrading after these forums which run UEP packet buffs the whole connection. So after that, people started to use update and everything.
I think that it's possible that some people might be like, oh crap, I got a virus, I need to do something about it. But I think that would be very minimal. So I don't think that there's any benefit, like I'm going to run a botnet to force all these people to do their Windows updates. It doesn't happen. I mean,
they have other motives.
and we'll show you later. There's some things that Bob the hacker has done where he tried to figure out if you could get this botnet to run the Windows update and fix itself. But yeah, that's a little different. Well,
That actually happens a lot too. Right? Yeah, they break in, they compromise the machine, fix the hole, just so that they can keep control of it.
yeah, and I've seen that. There's differences between the actual like professional bot herders and then like the kiddies. The kiddies, they'll just hit and run anything they can. They don't really try to secure it up. The professional guys, the more serious guys, it's their bread and butter. They'll secure up the botnet. They'll exploit and they'll build it up and then they'll lock it down so it's very hard to get into it and do anything about it. So all right, thanks for your feedback, and please, I'm open to any opinions on this. So we all know what online communities are, right? I hope so. So these are some of the online communities that we've been involved in, that I've been involved in from the Uh-oh. Did I break it? There we go. Okay. So like BBSs, I started, I'm not too young, but not too old, but I've been doing BBSs since I was a little kid. That was like the start of online communities, Usenet, that was a big deal for a while. Hosted a lot of game servers, ton of websites, forums. I mean, we all know what online communities are. So these are the ones that we've been directly involved in and had a lot of experience in defending and maintaining and stuff. So one thing that it comes down to, and I've learned this through the years, is that it just takes the right amount of resources in the right departments. So a lot of people, they want to host it themselves, and I'm all about that mentality. They want to do their own DNS, they want to do their own server in their basement and run it off their cable line, and I don't recommend that. But some people don't even consider the hardware and the math. Like, I got this firewall, I know it's 100 megabit, but how many packets per second can it take? How many rules can I load it up with? There's all sorts of stuff that you need to actually quantify, including simple stuff like the physical stuff, like heat requirements. Some guys, they load up a bunch of servers in a rack, and they never did the math to figure out, like, when the summer comes, all my stuff's gonna start popping, and they didn't consider it. So people need to consider stuff like that when they want to host it and do an online community project for themselves. And it's just a matter of like simple stuff, doing the math, knowing your configuration, knowing your limitations, your bandwidth, packets per second, memory. You have to do the math on that. So if you want to host 100,000 people, you have to know what you need to really host all those people. Some people just don't think of this. So we could get into firewalls, all day long and talk about the ways to manipulate, manage, which ones to use. And so, but it's important, if you're going to host it yourself, not outsource it or pay someone else to do it, you need to really know your features. So choose your vendors well, choose your hardware well, and do the research so that you have that information. Because otherwise, as traffic increases, your community gets bigger, and then, all of a sudden I'm getting DOS because some guy was talking smack. It's like, sometimes it can happen like that. And then you realize, taking gigs of traffic, and I didn't know I could not take that. Right. Some people don't consider that. So same thing with software. There's a lot of tools out there. There's a lot of software packages for all the different services that you can make available out there. And you have to put some forethought into that. And I've seen this happen more often than not, where communities, they throw together a project, but they don't think more than like 1 or 2 steps ahead. So I think that it's really important to look at your software very carefully as far as configuration management, which features you can use to manage the user base and to manage malicious activity. So I think that there's a lot to be done in that regard to think forward in that regard. So there's a lot of tools out there, and you can list them page after page. And so we only listed a couple that are really simple. Obviously, Snort and MRTG. I mean, that's
Right.
know how much bandwidth you're using, and Snort's all. And this thing keeps breaking a little bit. Okay, so monitoring is very important. Some people, they throw up servers and they don't put in notifications or any type of monitoring. I mean, at the very, very least, you need to have notifications. So if something starts to go wrong, it'll let you know so that it gets fixed. I mean, because if your site's down or the server's down, you know, we've all seen the websitesdown.com, right? Maybe not. So, I mean, you really have to put some thought into this so that the right people are notified. You have to have the software and the charting, and there's a lot of stuff that you can do to maintain the stability. Because if your servers aren't stable, obviously no one's going to want to use it. People aren't going to stay on it. And I wish Twitter would go down more so that people would stop using it. But so one thing that's really important is the personnel. You know, you have to figure out who you're going to work with as far as like trusting them to have access to your particular devices or your servers. You know, so there's a lot to be said about who to choose, and obviously they have to be trustworthy and reliable. Because I run across, let's say, hundreds of people who always want to help and contribute, and that's great, but then they don't really have the time or the dedication to it, and so they can help out for a little while, and so they're not quite as reliable. So I try to not to be too strict on that. If someone wants to contribute to a project, I let them contribute in any capacity that they can. But as far as like having deep access or real privileges to keeping it up, you know, I only want people that are really serious about it. You know, definitely try to keep the number of administrators and people down. Like the more people that are involved, the more management's required and more communication that's required. So it's like if you're hosting an IRC network for like 150 people, you don't need like 40 operators. You know, and I've seen that, you know, so, and I've experienced that on both sides of the coin where you have too many people and you don't have enough. So over the time, I've learned that you just add them slowly and vet them to a certain point to make sure that they're going to keep up on their responsibilities and keep up with the tide as far as the growth and technology requirements. So there's a saying, too many chiefs and not enough Indians, but I changed it to Native Americans. I'm Native American. So that's the thing, you know, sometimes you have to find that perfect ratio between the number of users that you're going to host, for whatever community it is, to the number of moderators, administrators, server hosters, and stuff like that. And then you just have to work it. Each community is different. You have to find that sweet spot. And the big deal is just when you have too many operators or too many administrators, you know, the overhead gets just crazy, trying to maintain communication and maintain a constant goal. So that's
Arguments.
I'm sorry.
Constant arguments.
Constant
Yeah.
arguments, you know, and voting that takes like 14 days to get 8 people to decide on something.
Right, yeah,
You know?
that's, yeah.
Like, it's a little
ridiculous.
excessive. So one thing I've learned in a lot of different communities, I learned this way back in the day hosting BBS, is when I had co-system operators, sysops, you want to give your community the same answer. You know, so if they go and ask a question, they want to get the same answer if they ask multiple people, because otherwise it's confusing. People don't trust the administration. So I've learned that the hard way and seen it be very beneficial where if you have uniform administration with all your people that are involved, then things go a lot better. So one thing I push really hard is offline communication. We all communicate online, but sometimes it's really good just to pick up a phone or get FaceTime. You know, I bother this guy all the time, you know, and vice versa, but it really is beneficial, and you have to have that. Even if you're a really tight-knit group on mailing lists and IRC networks, you do need to have FaceTime, you do need to have voice communication. It happens quicker, and you can get your thoughts across a lot faster. So I feel that's very important. You know, so uniform administration and communication on and offline is key. So these are a few of the combinations, you know, personnel, the hardware, the software. It all boils down to being able to make it work. So, and of course support. You know, people don't consider this until it's like breaking. You know, when you go with a provider, sometimes you want to run the support staff through their paces, know the network administrators, know the engineers, know what their capabilities are, know what the response times, at least so you have the expectations. So if something starts to go wrong, you know what your expectations are. They're going to fix it in a day versus, but I expected it in 20 minutes. Well, you
Right.
should have tested it.
And a lot of times, I mean, it's good to know if you can get in touch with a company, say it's an ISP that you're working with, or somebody's giving you internet access, to get on the phone and talk to engineers, get on a personal level with them. Because then whenever a bad thing does happen, for instance, like a denial of service, you have a contact that you can talk to who's almost like a buddy of yours, and you can say, hey, Bill, shit's hit the fan, I need help here, and he'll
Yeah.
go out and, to the appropriate routers upstream to start helping you out mitigate the different types of attacks.
And sometimes like a 6-pack of beer to the network engineer
word.
or the knock monkey at
Yes.
the colo can run you a long ways as far as getting some help. And I've seen this too, where you have colo and you get DOS and they don't really know what you're doing, so they automatically assume that you're part of it or you're malicious, so they just unplug your box or null route you. And I've seen this very often, even when you're paying lots of money for hosting. So I always found it's very beneficial to know the support staff, know the executive management, know the engineers, and as far as this slide goes, know the support for your software, for your hardware, your warranty options. And this goes for nonprofit hosting stuff out of your garage, as well as for the .coms and the big services out there. A lot of times they will drop the ball on that, and they don't consider that until like something actually breaks, or it's really going wrong.
Right, and I actually had a situation because I had not set up those. I was with a new provider, and I was running the Death Row cluster, the Open VMS cluster, and we actually got an attack. And since I hadn't established those connections ahead of time, basically whenever I called them up, it was just a complete runaround. For instance, I was getting a UDP flood to a VAX in our cluster. And so I'm getting this UDP flood, and I'm on the phone with them, and they say, well, maybe your machine is infected. Well, number one, I've never seen really somebody's able to suck packets off of the internet and put them to my machine. So that was pretty interesting. So I asked them how technically that was working. And then she asked me, what version of Windows XP am I running? Is it patch level 3? And I told her it's Open VMS. And then they just kind of like,
Blank face.
yeah, like just put pause on everything. We don't even know
Question
what you're talking about. Yeah, a big question mark. But I didn't have that already established with them. So that meant it took even longer because they were more confused about the hardware and the stuff that I had on my side. So it was a big pain.
And sometimes it can be just knowing who to call, know the right phone number, and test it. Call them up, say, hey, I'm so-and-so, and this is what I do, and explain to them why you host there and how cool they are. Totally social engineer them. 6-pack of beer, tell them they're awesome. I love your colo, man, it's rad. They'll suck it up, and they'll help you. And vice versa. You can help them, they can help you. So also emergency support options and a disaster recovery. Some people they lose their RAID or they lose hard drives, and they're like, I never did an offsite backup, and everything's gone. So you really have to think of this. It's not that difficult. So if you're going to host it yourself, consider these options. Disaster recovery. If that colo gets flooded, not with packets but water, you want to be able to move it and have other pieces of hardware, have other options, have other arrangements made. You got to think a few more steps ahead instead of just let's throw some boxes up and host a forum. It's like anyone can do that, but if you really want it to be stable and usable, you got to consider some of these options. So I'm big on disaster recovery. A lot of times professionally, I'm called in to clean up other people's messes, and usually it's after a disaster. So I've seen a lot of disasters. And that's always fun to clean up someone else's mess. You get paid more, and you look good at the end. So BBSs, back in the day, I started a long time ago with BBSs. My first computer was an IBM XT with a 10 megabyte hard drive, and that was my first BBS. So I've been doing it a long time, and eventually grew that to a pretty large community, and ended up being multi-lines and a lot of good stuff going on in that BBS. I learned a lot from it as far as maintaining the system ops, maintaining the user base and the forums, or not the forums, the message boards. It's been a long time since the BBS. So that's how I kind of started getting on with online communities, is cutting my teeth on that. And so I learned, very quickly, I had to have dedicated hardware. I had to have a dedicated phone line, because people started their BBSs like, call in between this time frame. Well, no one ever did that, They'll call your number 24 hours a day until the modem answers. So I learned very quickly as a kid that I needed dedicated hardware. I wanted to use my computer. I didn't want to have it running the BBS software all the time. And
then you also had to have a relationship with your POTS provider.
Yes, that was very interesting because I social engineered the POTS provider to get a very cheap phone line. Because in the United States, if you don't have a phone line, you can get what's called a lifeline. So you pay like 10% of what the normal phone line would cost. So I was able to social engineer the telco to sell me very cheap phone lines, and I ended up with multiples of those. And I just installed them in different parts of the house. So when the tech would come, he didn't realize I had.
I was also thinking about like explaining to them that emergency interrupts.
Oh yeah, that's
things like,
definitely an issue.
basically, denial of service of BBSs.
Absolutely.
Getting your phone number
predecessor
cut
to DOSes was people doing like emergency breakthroughs on your lines to drop a caller so that they could call in.
Or getting your line disconnected.
Yeah, I had, I mean, there was nothing really crazy going on the BBSs that I hosted, but there's still people who were pretty aggressive about wanting to troll you or mess with you. You know, they'd call the billing department of your phone company and be like, I need to cancel my phone lines. So I learned at a young age, I had to have a relationship with my telco as far as the billing department.
So
I needed to know the text.
They would actually call you and be like, why are you canceling your phone?
Yeah,
And you'd say,
eventually they
"Oh,
knew.
crap."
Eventually the operators knew that when someone was calling to do an emergency breakthrough on this number, they're like, no. We know that that's a data line. And,
Right.
you know, and some of them are really stupid. They bring up the line and they're like, I hear static. Oh, it's okay, just whistle and it'll drop. So, I mean, I learned at a young age that I had to have these relationships and do a little social engineering and a little bit of legwork in regards to securing that community, to keep the equipment up and stable, and to know what's going on. So if there was anything going on with my phone lines, sometimes they'd call me.
Right.
And so I had good relationships with the guys that came out and did the wiring. I had good relationships with the billing department. And eventually, I mean, it smoothed all out. So, I mean, to the predecessors of DOSing, there was definitely some craziness that went on way back then. So, and it was a lot of fun. I learned a lot from it, and I kind of taken that knowledge and rolled forward with it. So that's BBSs. So from there, I started working with like small ISPs and then went to like the big ISPs. And so there's a prime example of a disaster in works. So I've cleaned something up like that. So I've worked from the small mom and pop providers to the big ones, to the big colos, and it really boils down to a lot of the same combinations of the right recipe. You have to have quality gear that's dedicated. You can't run a web server and SQL and all this other stuff on one server. You have to spread it out. You have to have dedicated equipment, dedicated bandwidth.
I mean, if your project's going to be successful and hopefully lots of people are coming to it, yeah.
Yeah, you have to consider this.
Yeah.
So, and it's the same thing. Good communication relationships with your upstream providers and your telco. And so this translated from the BBS days to running co-location facilities. They would do all kinds of stuff as far as, if you had a client that was spamming, well, then they wouldn't deal with that client. They would just deal with you. So I had to have good communication with my providers so that they knew that it wasn't me that was spamming or that it wasn't my botnet or my malicious traffic. It was a client, and I'll deal with it. So big thing is software management configuration. Some companies, they'll set stuff up and then, I don't know if it's techs just wanting to have job security, but they don't document it, they don't back it up, and they don't manage it very well. So I'm very big on that. As I've worked through professionally, I'm now more of management type stuff. So I'm big on getting my engineers and techs to document and back their stuff up and spread the knowledge around amongst the team. So it's very important, especially for ISPs. And the same thing. I mean, it's the same tools that just rolls forward to another architecture, another infrastructure. So.
What do you use for documentation?
For documentation, Notepad. No, internal wikis, internal forums, voice bridges as far as people talking to each other. I'm big on intercommunication amongst teams. But whatever gets the information out there. I've seen recently, and I've used this a lot with the last couple of companies, are internal wikis. Anyone can go in and edit it, knows who's edited. So it's you don't have to get really high tech with it. It's just very simple. So next thing I started getting into as far as hosting online communities after I started working for colos and ISPs was game servers. Everyone wants to do something with their bandwidth, and it was really cool to have first-person shooters. I don't know if anyone remembers Subspace. I was really sad when that died. I hosted a Subspace server, and that went really big for a while. And then, first-person shooters, I hosted a Counter-Strike server for a long time, and that became really big. I can talk a little bit about that as far as some of the malicious activity I received from that. Just by hosting a game server and having good clan matches, the sore loser would come back and DOS the server. So within minutes, I mean, that they got their asses wiped, and 5 minutes later, you're getting DOSed. And so call the winning team up and say, good job, guys. So, I mean, I've seen it where, I don't know what the mentality is. I don't understand it, but
Just sore
happens.
losers.
It happens. Sore losers. It happens. So even with the game servers, you can get DOSed. It's a wide range of stuff. It can happen, certainly. So like I keep saying, it's the same methods and the same technology. It just rolls forward into different applications and different services. Websites, forums, I've done a lot of that. I used to work for socialnetworking.com. I'm not going to say their name. I'll just call them Geriatric Space. So they dealt with all kinds of stuff, and it was a matter of using the same stuff, monitoring, dealing with spammers, flooders, and denial of service. They used to always have Russian botnets that are constantly hitting their CAPTCHAs. So it was a matter of having a good relationship with my software vendors so that they could deal with that, and they horribly dealt with it. And this is an example of a large .com social networking site that failed at it consistently. They didn't have dedicated hardware. They didn't have good patch management. They failed at it. So I could only help them so much, so eventually I went and got a better job. So that's an example with websites and forums. I've done...
Metallic.
I'm sorry? I think that's coming up soon. Yeah, websites. Yeah, so I'll skip to this one because we're talking about websites. This was a big project I worked on for, I still work with it. It's last, 3 or 4 years now. The Metallica fan club websites and some kind of monster.com. So I've worked with them quite a bit to help keep their services stable. Their record company did not have the expertise or the knowledge to keep their websites up. In particular, the forums, dealing with flooders and lots of traffic. The main issue was lots of traffic. Electra could not pull that together. Nothing against Electra, they have good infrastructure, they're just one of those big giant record companies, but Metallica went to a good friend of mine at Teal Networks and asked them to host parts of their websites. So some kind of monster.com, metallicabb.com, and there's a couple other domains that all redirect there. But it was a big deal. It took a few months for us to find the right combination of hardware and hosting and the right software. But in the beginning, it was running a custom forum, and then they started using PHPBB, and we know how secure PHPBB is, right? Yeah, ultra secure stuff. So now they use a commercial product, which has very good support. You can always get someone to write custom patches as needed, to get help. So we found the right combination to keep this website up. And they take a ton of traffic just on this one piece of it, the forums. When there's huge spikes of traffic for events, new songs coming out, it comes out to the fan base, to the fan club first. So, and these people are rabid about getting their Metallica. I'm a little bit of a fan. I like heavy metal and I listen to all kinds of stuff, but these guys are crazy. They really want their pre-release stuff. So it was a big deal. We get a lot of traffic on it. And eventually we got it to a point where now it's stable and they're very happy with it. We don't have any problems with flutters. The system deals with it itself. There's good notification, so if anything starts to go wrong, the right administration, the right staff are all involved, and it stays up, and the users can use it and they don't complain about it anymore for a couple years now. So I give a lot of that credit to Teal Networks. He's got a lot of colo and spent a lot of time with working with the administration and the band members to keep it going and to find out exactly what they needed. And I work with Teal Networks a lot. I do some security consulting for them, and I help them with their colocation. So definitely check out Teal Networks. So you have basically like 3 options to deal with botnets, and that's like the mitigation. Okay, you can just hunker down and defend yourself. Put your hard hat on and just wait for it to go away. And usually it'll take a while and you'll be down. But if you want to stay up, you have to defend yourself a little bit. The second option is to monitor and log and then report it. And it's not about like, I don't know what the correct European term is, about like being a narc or being a snitch or whatever, but I feel that every little bit helps, especially to researchers. If you're not going to be proactive, every little bit that you collect up can help somewhere. So that's the second option, is just monitor, log, track, and report. And then third is be proactive. You can play the same games that they play, not necessarily as far as being malicious, but you can proactively go after them. And unless they're the criminal type or the professional type, they're really easy to take down. Bob the Hacker's worked on this a little bit, and it's really easy. So if you want to get proactive, there's a lot of researchers out there, there's a lot of websites out there that can help. But option two, if you just want to share information and just research and talk and monitor, there's a lot to do there. So Bob the hacker sometimes goes pretty proactive on certain issues, but generally I'm pretty passive as far as just monitoring and just keep the sites up. I don't care what you guys do out on the internet. I don't care what I do out on the internet. Black hat, gray hat, white hat, whatever you want to call it. This was my philosophy: is like do whatever you want out there. Just don't bring it to my neighborhood. Really, I don't care. I love talking with them. I love learning and get a different perspective. Even if you're a criminal, that's fine. It's none of my business. It really isn't. Like hosting the IRC networks, it's my business to keep stuff private. So if you're running a channel, and I don't care what you do in there, just don't bring your malicious activity around me. So, because then I have to deal with it. Not like I'm obligated, but like to keep my site stable, to keep my community happy. Not my community, but keep our communities happy. You have to do something. So, so those are the three options pretty much I can boil that down to. And I kind of drive that home because people don't know what to do. They don't know how to approach it. And so if you boil it down to those three options, you can just defend, manage your firewalls, manage your support teams, manage your bandwidth, and just wait for it to go away. Pray that it goes away. Pray heavily. I don't believe in God, so. So defending, just like I've been talking about. You just have to weather it and just do the best you can. And then also, I'm big on this, and I hate to phrase it like this, but this is my opinion, and please make your own, but don't ever negotiate with these guys, ever. It doesn't do any good. And they don't have the testicular fortitude to hold to any agreements. So even if you do try to negotiate with them and make a deal with them or give them something to leave you alone, it'll never work. So what is it, the United States that says it, never negotiate with terrorists? Yeah. It's kind of the same thing. I mean, I hate to say it that way, but I've tried it and it doesn't work. It never does. These guys do not hold to agreements. They don't have any morals in that regard, or loyalties. They'll screw each other to get a one-up, So when you come across these groups or have this happen to you, I sincerely believe don't ever negotiate with these guys or girls. I have seen girl bot herders. So in defending your network, you have to adapt. You have to be able to monitor and know what's going on. Sometimes they're very simple attacks, and so with very minimal configuration changes, you can defend against it pretty easily. An example is like 2600.net was taking a send flood on port 80. It's an IRC network. They obviously aren't listening on port 80. These guys didn't think it through, but it was very easy to defend against because I was able to see it and react against it and adapt. And use your resources accordingly. Well, I'm a big fan of like the art of war. Only do the least amount of effort required. You may have like 150 features that you can kick in to defend against this stuff, but if you only enable 2, they're only going to go that extra mile. They're only going to go that far to get back at you. So you don't have to whip out all the guns. You can start with the small pea shooter and then let them bring out their pea shooter, and then you understand what I'm saying? So it's. Yeah, don't have to go double barrel shotgun all the time.
It's an arms race.
Yeah, it's an arms race. It really is. So don't use all your tricks immediately. So also, this was kind of interesting. Low-hanging fruit. I learned this kind of the hard way and on accident, is that sometimes if you not let them, but if they take down some things, then they think they got you good. And then they'll disappear. They're like, oh, we got them. So sometimes you have some infrastructure or some servers that are weaker than others. So they may attack the whole network or the whole infrastructure, and then they take down pieces of it, and you plead, oh my God, you totally pwned me. My life is ruined. My girlfriend left me. Like, no one can chat. And they eat it up, and they really do, because they don't really think it through or know enough or monitor enough.
Yeah.
They just, send the CNC. They just attack, and so if you scream bloody murder that you got pwned,
they'll actually stop their attacks.
They'll stop. Yeah. So I do believe in that is low-hanging fruit. It does work. Sometimes you just have some weak infrastructure on purpose. Not that you take it down. Let them take it down. Hit that one. No, dude, that's my strongest server. Go for it. Bring it.
You'll never take it down. Crap.
You'll never take it down. And you can goad them, and we can get into that more later. So, and I'm also a big firm believer of use real gear and real bandwidth. It's like someone wants to host their forum on their home cable line, Now I know you guys in Europe have ridiculously high bandwidth cable lines, but in the United States, DSL and cable is pretty shitty. So, like I heard a guy talking about his DSL line, and he had like 15 megabits down and 5 meg up, and you can't even get that in the United States. So it's a little different. I always tell people, if you want to host it yourself, that's great and all, but beyond, let's say, 20 to 50 users, you don't want to host this stuff at home. Especially if you're going to take any type of attacks or deal with anything significant. So use real gear. You're not going to use a Linksys router and firewall to defend your network or to keep something up. Okay, you can put DDWRT on it, but still, it's Linksys. It's a piece of crap. Use real hardware. Use real bandwidth. So if you're serious about hosting an online community, and I've also learned to outsource. So sometimes you can't just do it all yourself. You got to pay someone. And if they got more bandwidth and more resources than you, what's the problem with that? It stays up. So usually my first response to running into malicious activity is just to defend. Like I said before, it's not my job. I don't care what you guys do out there. If I ended up taking some scatter from someone else's attack, usually I'll just defend against it and not like turn a blind eye, but I'm too busy. And there's too much of this stuff out there. So I can't spend all my time just dealing with douchebags all day. So, excuse the terms, but. So logging, tracking, and reporting. And before I forget this too, because I didn't put this in the slide, but I do want to bring this up, and this is, I've dealt with this in particular issues. Privacy. You may want to log, and you may want to monitor, but you want to understand that your community or your users may have certain expectations for privacy, and so you want to hold to that. For example, like 2600.net, we've always logged, but we log for 72 hours and only connections. And I tell people that, and it's transparent. If they want to see it, I'll show it to them, so that that trust is still there. If they want to chat on the IRC network, they can do that securely, and no one's going to have any logs of that. It's impossible with the software that we use. But I do log connections for 72 hours, just so that I know what's going on. I can see flood connections. I can see all kinds of stuff with that. And it's the very minimal. And it doesn't take a lot to maintain that privacy. Whether you can automatically encrypt or purge, there's a lot of things that you can do to maintain that.
And it depends on the community that you're dealing with. On the 2600 net, a lot of people, even if you tell them we log connections and 420, oh geez, you're logging and tracking me, and shut up.
They're like, you're logging, you automatically work for the FBI.
Right, yeah. So a lot of times, in some communities just simply won't care. They'll just be like, oh, well, I understand you got a job to do, so log everything. And they're like, well, okay. But so depending on what your community expects is about how much logging you should do.
And I'm big on letting people know that ahead of time. So your terms and conditions, your acceptable use policy, however you want to get that communicated to your user base, make sure that they know and it's transparent. So that their expectations are met and they don't get caught with their pants down like, oh my God, I did not know that you've been logging me this whole time. And not like you're logging them. I mean, the goal is to be able to defend and manage your network. So it's not about logging them, it's logging your resources. So you have to consider some stuff when it comes to logs, especially with privacy. I didn't want to forget that. I wanted to hammer that pretty good on the slides, but there's a lot more other stuff to put in there. So one thing that helps is if you're getting DOS, is just grab a TCP dump. Even if you don't have the ability to analyze it, you don't even know where to send it immediately, but if you grab a TCP dump, it helps. If you can give that to someone later, a researcher, it definitely helps. You get a good idea of what's going on, and it helps, certainly. And then logging, tracking, and reporting. I'm not, how do I phrase this? You don't want to be a narc or a snitch or anything, but sometimes you do have to let the right people know. I've seen botnets out there that are used just for trading child pornography. So that's something that inspires me to let the appropriate people know how to deal with that. It's not my job, it's their fucking job. They should be doing it. So I'll do the minimal effort to let the appropriate people know how to deal with it. So, and excuse the language, but I'm very, I've seen it more often than not where they aren't doing their jobs, so I try to inspire them and educate them so that they will do their job, because it's not my job to deal with these guys. So, there's all kinds of organizations out there that can help with this. They may not know exactly how to help you, especially if it's to the point where you see really bad stuff and you may feel inspired to go to law enforcement and whatnot, and I don't necessarily always feel that that's the right path. We all have our own opinions about law enforcement, but it does help to have a good relationship with the appropriate people so that they know that you're serious and you're not giving them erroneous data and that you're only bringing them legit stuff. If I bring a bunch of intel to law enforcement about child pornographers, I want them to take it seriously and run with it, do their job. Like I said, I'm not big on going that avenue, but sometimes, at least for me, my morals and ethics, when I run across this stuff out on the internet, I feel that something has to be done, and every little bit helps. So there's also community-driven websites out there. Shadowservers.org is pretty cool, and they do a lot of cool stuff, as far as charting, tracking, and reporting, and sharing research data. And also, I've ran into a couple people here that are researchers for it. Had a good conversation my first day here with the gentleman. I'll forget his name, but there's a lot of people out there that have the time and the inspiration to research this and run with it. So if you don't have the ability or the time to do it, at least collect a little bit of data and just hand it off. Give it to someone else who will run with it, because they'll love it and they'll eat it up and they'll thank you for you later. So that's logging, reporting, and tracking. And then there's fun stuff, being proactive. Bob the Hacker has been proactive.
Good friend of ours.
I'm sorry?
A good friend of ours.
A good friend of ours. We run into him every once in a while. So, like I said, a lot of these guys are pretty lowbrow or not very sophisticated, and they always want to show off and brag, and I don't know what it is. I'm pretty good at keeping secrets, but these guys are really easy to social engineer. So if you can't always get the in on their botnet, then you just become friends with them, and they'll give you the keys to the kingdom pretty.
Well, I've also done this too. I was connecting. Bob was connecting to a particular botnet, and actually it was me. I was doing a little bit of research, and when I was connecting through Tor and whatnot, and these guys, they would see the Tor exit nodes, and I would tell them that for one thing, I was a reporter. I claimed that I was this female reporter from the Washington Post and got her background information in case I thought he might look it up, which he didn't. And of course, then he found out that I was a reporter. He would start telling me all kinds of fun things so I could engage a good conversation with him. But then he figured I couldn't be a reporter, I have to be a hacker because I keep coming from all these places all over the world. So I had to explain to him what Tor was and how it worked.
I mean, these bot herders are really smart people.
Right, and I'm like thinking, wow, you should be really using Tor out of all people.
You're obviously a hacker if you're using Tor, right? And I bet
the exit notes he thought I had broken into, they would say stuff like tor.mit.edu, and he'd be like, you must have broken into that. Shut up.
be like, dude, I hacked that. That box is mine. And I'm sure you got a lot of mileage out of telling them that you're a girl.
Oh, yes, being the female reporter, yes.
So, I mean, I can't fake that too well online, but sometimes, I mean, social engineering, you can get a lot of mileage or kilometers out of just social engineering these guys. They want to brag, they want to show off, and Bob the Hacker is seeing a lot of that, and sometimes it's just too easy. It may only take like a week, but it's just too easy. So reverse engineer their networks and their bot code. If you have the time and the energy and have the knowledge to do so. I'm not a programmer. I do a little bit, but I rely on other people to help me reverse their binaries. So you can learn a lot just by analyzing a look at it without even doing a whole lot. Just looking at their code, looking at their infrastructure, and seeing how they're running it. And I'm also a big thing about educating others. People like, oh, I'm infected with a virus, and they don't connect it that could be part of a botnet. And it's like a bajillion of these computers out there who don't have AV or don't do their Windows updates, and that is, a symptom of this big problem. So I try to educate people so that when they get infected with a virus, I tell them this is part of a larger problem. You need to be proactive about maintaining your computer, and here's why, and so I'm big on educating others and communication with people. We do a lot with phones, like we like phones a little, so we talk a lot, and I'm big on sharing information, so whatever that may be. So obviously log and report, that can be pretty proactive, and you can get some good feedback on that, and then hack them back. I don't think that anyone should be as malicious as they are. Don't be malicious at all, but you can play them at their own game, and they're not very good at it. So, I mean, really, and it's, yeah, they're really...
Usually they're not very good.
They're not very good at it. So, this last part, and I've experienced this on several occasions, you really want to be careful with the professionals or the serious ones, because that's like their bread and butter. They live in a country where the money comes not too easily, and so if they can make money off botnets, you know, that adds up into their PayPal account pretty sweetly. And so you want to be careful and protect yourself and your resources. Not always like use your own identity, because they can get pretty aggressive about protecting their work. So that's definitely something to consider when you go proactive, or if you want to be proactive. Not that you may be a target of that, but it's certainly possible. So it's something, you know, to think ahead. So if you're going to go that route, certainly know that all the people that's involved, what their vulnerabilities are and their liabilities.
That's the reason I was mentioning using Tor, because a lot of times I don't, if I'm doing a little bit of research, I don't want the herder at the command and control to see where I'm coming from, the company I'm coming from, or even, you know, a home IP address or anything like that. That's where Tor is really great. So I don't want them to have any of their information about me, because it's going to lead to more attacks and whatnot.
Because Beav is really easy to find out there on the net, yeah. So, like I said, sometimes it's really just too easy, and it's that easy, you just have to do it. Or Bob the hacker might do it. So Bob ran into this guy, and he's on an IRC network that was being hosted by Bob, and so it was really easy to see that this guy comes in and changes to the special nick he needs to have, and he drops the clear text password and starts controlling his botnet. So in this case, like when they're using your own resources, it makes it very easy to circumvent or monitor or look and see what they're doing, to learn what they're doing, and maybe do something about it. So this is just an example. I mean, this is something that Bob ran into, and so it gets really easy. So this guy invited Bob the hacker to his private IRC network so that he could show off his botnet, and then opt him, and then attacked Bob's network, and then dropped his clear text password right in the CNC channel. Now, botnets on IRC have become less and less, and more so the kiddies are still using IRC for command and control, and more so the professionals and more serious ones are doing web portals and peer-to-peer type stuff and using other types of protocols to maintain their command and control. So IRC definitely makes it easier. This is just one example. You know, Bob has ran into tons and tons of stuff out there. This is just one example of how easy it can be.
And say so, for instance, and then Bob could do stuff like, I believe at one point he was going to update his bot herd. So Bob already knew the password to control this particular botnet, so he could create a 0byte.exe file and say, this is the new release of our software, which would of course would go to all the machines and get rid of that particular bot that's running.
Yeah.
I mean, if Bob wanted to do so, because he
Maybe.
could control it.
Maybe. So, I mean, sometimes it's as simple as that. You know, they are so easy to get into their organization or get into their network. You just wait for them to go to sleep. And then, you know, have fun with their botnet. What Bob likes to do is just shut it down. Other people like to take it over and grow it and learn from it and, you know, try to do some cool stuff with it. But that's what Bob does.
Right. I've also seen it too where they've done, and this was mostly in Perl. I think when Bob was doing this, these were a Windows-based botnet, where they were doing lots of Perl bots at the time, and but this was a long time ago. But in the code, you could actually go through and you could see what IRC server and what key they were using to go to what channel for the command and control. But what they would do is they have a list of administrators. Well, they would have 3 administrators online, but 5 administrators listed in there. So if anybody happened to become the name of the person in that file, they automatically became an administrator. Well, the changing your nick command isn't very hard. So I've heard of people who would wait till people go to, the bot herders go to sleep and then become one of the administrators and then tell the botnet, hello, how are you? I would like you to, kill yourself.
So, like where Bob was invited to this private IRC network, they had no nick serve. He coughed up the clear text passwords. All he wanted was a shell and one IP address. So it was really easy to get in on this guy's stuff. So sometimes, like I said, sometimes it's just way too easy. And generally these are the kiddies, but I think that it all adds up, a little bit helps. So all that you can learn or do in that regard, it helps. So this is just one example. The Turkish botnet and a Spanish botnet. And then we can get to the end here. There is hope. It's not all bad. There are a lot of botnets out there and a lot of malicious activity, but like I keep saying, every little bit helps. Educate people, talk to people, do whatever you can, because it does help. So there's always lots to learn, and the moral of the story is to keep an eye on things and monitor and look at stuff. Not like monitor people's traffic, but if you're hosting a community and you're trying to keep stuff operational, just keep an eye out. You can learn a lot just by observing.
Submitting data to researchers and whatnot of stuff that you see.
Yeah. So we'll take any questions or any comments or opinions, and here's my contact info, and I'll leave this up here, and then also Beeves. And then, yeah, anyone have any questions or opinions, or you? Yeah. Thank you. You got a question? Hello? Oh, from Yada, okay.
Anyway, can you give an example of someone either tracking down and attacking their attackers, or you talk earlier about
Sure, I can. The question was, is there any examples of being proactive and going after bot herders or going after specific networks and stuff like that? Certainly I can tell quite a few stories about that and how that's happened. For example, with like irc.2600.net, they get DOSed and flooded all the time. And so it was a matter of, sometimes you try to talk to them and just, make peace with them, or
being proactive is sometimes illegal.
yeah, no, without a doubt, being proactive can sometimes and very specifically be illegal. So you have to weigh the consequences and weigh the issues and know exactly what you're getting into. Well, there's definitely lots of people out there that do that. So, but definitely in that regard, like with 2600.net, I've tried to negotiate with them to leave us alone, and it never works. And I can probably dig up some chat conversations and stuff to show that. And as far as being proactive, like there was an example of Bob being proactive, and you could ask Bob later about if there's more to those logs. So, yeah. Any other questions or? Yeah, and then I am the owner of the world's only hacker dog, and so you can friend him and Twitter with him. And unfortunately, I didn't have enough time to get him microchipped, and he was pretty big on his privacy concerns, so I really had to talk him into getting the RFID chip. But he is the world's only hacker dog. Feel free to chat with him anytime. Usually it only says is bark bark, so you'll have to get used to that and translate that. So, and that's it. Thank you very much for listening.